A struggling father can't afford his daughter's prom dress until Dante Rivers steps in to help. What would you do if your daughter's dream night, the one she's waited for her entire life, was slipping away simply because you couldn't afford a dress? This is the heartbreaking reality one father faced until a mysterious stranger stepped in and changed everything. But who was he, and why did he care? Stay with us, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity in ways you never imagined. Rain poured heavily over the narrow streets of Charleston, South Carolina, turning them into glistening rivers of reflection beneath the streetlights. The wind cut through the late April air with an unforgiving chill. Yet despite the storm's force, Masal Vega, a single mother, trudged along with determination. Her soaked clothes clung to her body as she struggled to drag her son's old rusted bicycle through the puddles. The bike's back wheel wobbled, making each step a new challenge. Alio, her 10-year-old son, was walking beside her. He had an eager look in his eyes, his enthusiasm untouched by the rain or their dire circumstances. His clothes, worn thin from years of use, were a stark contrast to the crisp, new Mr. Carter Brooksets his classmates wore. But none of that seemed to matter to him. Emilio had just been selected to join the school's cycling team, an opportunity he had been dreaming about for months. The only problem was that his bike was more of a liability than a prize, barely held together with duct tape and a prayer. "Mom, do you think I can win the race?" Lucas Morales asked, looking up at his mother with hopeful eyes. His voice, despite the bleak weather, was full of excitement. Elena Morales smiled faintly, wiping away the droplets of rain from her face. "Of course, Miko, you're going to show them how it's done." The truth was, Elena Morales wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if the bike could even make it through another ride, let alone an actual race. But she couldn't let her son see her doubts. She would fix it somehow. She promised herself that if it meant skipping meals or taking on another job, she would do whatever it took. She'd spent so many nights worrying, but she would never let Emilio know that. She had promised herself that he would always believe in something, even if it was just a dream of winning a bike race. But tonight it was different. And the bike gave way completely, the chain snapping with a loud pop just as they reached the street corner near their apartment. Mercil heard the sound before Lucas Morales did, and her heart sank. She pulled the bike to the curb, cursing under her breath as she tried to steady herself, the rain now falling even harder. "Mama?" Alio's voice broke through the sound of the storm. She turned to him, forcing a smile. "It's okay, Emilio. We'll fix it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Just give me a second." She knelt beside the bike. But it was no use. The damage was too severe. There was no way they could get it home without help. Not in the storm. She didn't want to admit it, but they were stranded. And then, just as Elena Morales tried to lift the bike on her own, she slipped in the mud, her arms scraping against the rough pavement. Pain shot up her arm, but she bit back a scream. Emilia was watching his face, pale with concern. She couldn't show him any more weakness. But just as she started to get back up, she heard a sound behind her, like a car slowly approaching. She turned her gaze, locking onto a sleek black SUV that had pulled up beside them. The headlights cut through the rain like twin spotlights. The driver's side window rolled down, and a figure stepped out. Elena Morales blinked, trying to make out the silhouette through the rain. He was tall, built like a mountain of muscle, and dressed in dark, expensive clothes that didn't belong in this part of town. But it was his face that caught her attention the most. He looked calm, as though the storm and the broken bike were nothing but trivial things. And when he spoke, his voice was deep and steady. "Ned, some help?" Elena Morales hesitated. Her instincts told her to decline to turn away, but something in the stranger's voice, the way he held himself, made her reconsider. She glanced at Alio, whose eyes were wide with awe, and then at the stranger again. It was then that she realized who he was. The man in front of them was none other than Big Shaq, a local figure known for his charitable work in the community. Though she hadn't expected to see him in this neighborhood, especially not on a night like tonight. "Are you Big Shaq?" she asked, her voice uncertain. He nodded with a slight smile. "That's me. And you are Marisol." Elena Morales. She hesitated, still unsure about accepting his help, but the cold wind cut through her, and she felt the chills seep into her bones. Lucas Morales stood silently beside her, looking up at the man in awe. "Why don't you both get inside?" Big Shaq suggested. "It's cold out here." Marisol looked at her son, who was practically glowing with excitement at the thought of sitting in the warm car. She didn't know what it was, but she trusted Dante Rivers' calm demeanor. Perhaps it was the desperation she felt, or perhaps it was simply because for the first time in a long while, someone was offering a hand when she needed it most. I don't know," she stammered, glancing at the broken bike. "It's okay," Big Shaq said, his voice reassuring. "We'll get that bike taken care of. Just let me help." Without another word, she nodded, and they both climbed into the SUV, the warmth of the car enveloping them. As the rain continued to pour outside, a strange sense of relief washed over her. Maybe things would turn out all right after all. It was late April in Charleston, South Carolina, the kind of spring evening that made the air feel thick and damp, as if the city itself were struggling to breathe beneath the weight of the rain. The streets were narrow and winding, older than most of the buildings they ran alongside, their brick walls telling stories of the years that had passed. Stories of bustling markets and grand homes, now faded into the background of a neighborhood that had seen better days. In the heart of this quiet working-class neighborhood stood a weathered apartment complex with peeling paint and broken windows. The building was hardly ever quiet, but at this hour the sounds of life seemed to ebb away under the steady drum of rain tapping on the rooftops. Inside, the rooms were small or cramped and filled with the scent of old wood and dust. Though to Elena Morales, it felt like home. Elena Morales was a 32-year-old single mother, originally from a small town in Mexico. She had come to the United States years ago, chasing the American dream that so many had spoken of. But that dream had proven to be far more complicated than she had ever imagined. Life had a way of knocking you down again and again. But Elena Morales had learned to keep going even when the world around her seemed to make no sense. She worked 2 jobs, neither of which paid her enough to make ends meet. But they were enough to keep a roof over her head and food on the table for her son Elio. She had a fierce determination to give him a life that was better than the one she had. Despite all the setbacks, Elena Morales never allowed herself to dwell on the hardships. Her focus, her energy, and her every effort were all directed toward one goal: Emilio's future. Lucas Morales was 10 years old, a bright, curious boy who dreamed big, too big perhaps for his circumstances. He wasn't like the other kids at school, kids who wore the latest clothes and carried brand new gear. Lucas Morales didn't have those luxuries, but he had something far more important: heart. At school, he had made a name for himself in the cycling world despite the odds stacked against him. His classmates arrived on sleek high-end bikes that looked like they belonged in professional races. But Emilio's bike was nothing short of a joke. It was a hand-me-down from a cousin, a rusted old thing with a wobbly wheel and a busted brake that didn't exactly scream racer. Yet none of that stopped Emilio from dreaming. The cycling team had selected him after an enthusiastic tryout, and while the other kids were excited about their shiny new gear, Emilio was just grateful for the chance to prove himself. He was determined to race to show everyone that even if he didn't have the newest bike, he had something more important: a relentless will to succeed. Elena Morales saw the spark in Elio's eyes. The same spark that had driven her to come to America to work tirelessly for a future that seemed so out of reach at times. But she couldn't help but feel the weight of their reality pressing down on her shoulders. How could she possibly afford to fix his bike? The promise she made to him to make sure he had what he needed seemed more impossible with each passing day. She had tried everything, taking on extra shifts at the diner, working weekends, cleaning houses, but even that wasn't enough. Every dollar she made went toward bills or food, and by the end of the month, there was barely anything left. Her son deserved better than this, but Elena Morales had no idea how she would ever make that happen. It was a constant struggle worrying, but never letting Lucas Morales see the cracks in her resolve. Tonight, as she walked alongside Emilio, the rain coming down harder with each step, she felt the familiar sting of exhaustion. The bike was no longer just a means of transportation. It was a symbol of the sacrifices she was making. She had promised him that she would fix it, and she would even if it meant skipping meals, even if it meant working herself into the ground. As they walked through the rain, the weight of the bike, the burden of their struggle seemed almost too much to bear. Elena Morales' steps slowed, her shoulders sagged, but she couldn't stop. Amelia was beside her, his small voice brimming with excitement about the upcoming race. But Marisol's mind was miles away. "Mom, I think I can win the race." "Don't you?" Lucas Morales asked, his voice hopeful as he looked up at her. She glanced down at him, a smile tugging at her lips despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. "Of course, mijo," she replied, her voice as steady as she could make it. You're going to do great. I know it." But deep inside, she wondered if she was lying to him. The night stretched on, and with each step the bike seemed to grow heavier, the rain colder. When the bike finally gave way, its chains snapping with a loud, definitive pop, Marisol felt her heart drop. It was over. There was no fixing it now. She tried to lift the bike to keep going, but it was hopeless. The bike had been on its last legs for weeks, and now it was finally giving up. She tried to remain calm, but as she slipped on the wet pavement, falling hard onto the ground and scraping her arm, the weight of everything crashed down on her. She had failed. She had promised Emilio that she would fix his bike, that she would make sure he had a chance. And now, standing in the rain, covered in mud, and with the bike broken beyond repair, Elena Morales felt the crushing reality of her situation. Emilio rushed to her side, his small hands trembling as he tried to help her up. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, worry evident in his voice. "I'm fine, Majo," she lied, smiling through the pain. "Don't worry." But in that moment she knew she couldn't fix this. The rain wasn't the only thing that was drowning them. So was the weight of the world she had been carrying all on her own. And yet as she glanced at Emilio's face, filled with concern, she knew that she couldn't stop now. She had to keep going for him. Just then, a car pulled up beside them, its headlights cutting through the dark, and a man stepped out into the rain. Marisol squinted, trying to make out the figure through this, the owled downpour. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that stood out against the storm. But it wasn't until he spoke that she recognized him. "You need some help?" he asked, his voice deep and calm, cutting through the noise of the rain. The rain was coming down in sheets as Elena Morales and Lucas Morales climbed into the warmth of the sleek black SUV. As the door clicked shut behind them, a rush of heat enveloped them, the chill of the storm finally slipping away, and Marisol felt a sense of relief wash over her. The seat beneath her was plush, a stark contrast to the hard wooden benches of the bus she usually took. She glanced at Alio, who was grinning from ear to ear, eyes wide with wonder. "Wow, it's so warm," Emilio whispered, his voice almost reverent. He was sitting in the back seat, his fingers tracing the smooth leather of the upholstery. His small hands, usually calloused from days of playing soccer in the dirt, now felt the luxury of something entirely different. Marisol's heart squeezed at the sight of him, his excitement infectious. Yet she couldn't help but feel a pain of guilt. They didn't belong here. Not in a car this nice, not in this world of polished luxury. They were just two people from a neighborhood that barely showed up on the maps of Charleston. They didn't have the connections or the wealth of others, and they sure as hell didn't belong in a war world where help seemed to come from strangers driving expensive cars. The man who had stopped Big Shaq slid into the front seat. Marisol turned toward him, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt. His calm demeanor made the space around him feel like a comfortable place, but she still couldn't shake the discomfort of the unknown. Dante Rivers was silent for a moment, his hands resting casually on the wheel as he glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "You two okay back there?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Elena Morales nodded, the words stuck in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say, but there was something comforting about the way Dante Rivers spoke. He wasn't rushing to fill the space with empty words. It felt like he knew they needed time, needed space, to let the reality of their situation settle before doing anything. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice shaky. "You didn't have to stop." Dante Rivers gave a small, reassuring smile as he turned the car into a quieter street. The headlights illuminated the wet pavement, and the rain continued its relentless assault against the windshield. But here inside the car, it felt like a safe haven away from the storm, both outside and inside. "It's no trouble," Dante Rivers said. "You both seemed like you needed a little help, and I'm not one to look the other way." Elena Morales wasn't sure what to say to that. How could she explain the daily grind, the exhaustion, the constant worry about making ends meet? How could she explain that it wasn't just about the bike breaking down, but about a lifetime of struggles that had led her to this point, a lifetime of trying to keep Emilio's dreams alive, even when it felt like every door was closing? Alio, oblivious to the tension that was hanging in the air, suddenly piped up from the back seat. "I'm going to be the best cyclist on the team," he said, his voice full of optimism. "When I win, I'm going to show everybody. I'm going to ride faster than anyone else." Elena Morales turned to look at him, her heart swelling with pride and sadness. She knew how much this meant to him. For Alio, cycling wasn't just a sport. It was a way to prove himself. It was his chance to be more than the boy who struggled with hand-me-downs and second-hand clothes. He wanted to be something bigger, to rise above the limitations of his circumstances. "I know you will, mijo," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a lot of heart. I'm so proud of you." Lucas Morales beamed, clearly unaware of the weight of his mother's words. He was still caught up in the excitement of the race ahead, the idea of proving himself on that shiny new bike that he had no idea was waiting for him. It was in that moment, as the car continued down the rain-slick streets, that something in Marisol's heart stirred. She had worked so hard for this, for Emilio's future, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could carry the weight alone. The world had a way of knocking her down, and no matter how many times she stood back up, it felt like she was always fighting an uphill battle. But there was something about this man, this stranger, who had stopped to help them, that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do it alone. Maybe there were people out there who understood, who, cared, without expecting anything in return. The car finally came to a stop in front of their apartment building. The rain had lessened, though the streets were still wet and glistening. Dante Rivers turned off the engine, his gaze flicking to Elena Morales as she gathered herself before stepping out of the car. "You sure you're okay getting home?" Dante Rivers asked, his concern genuine. Elena Morales smiled, the weight in her chest lightening just a little. "Yes. We'll be fine. Thank you again for everything." Dante Rivers nodded, then reached into the back seat. He handed Emilio a small folded piece of paper. "This is for you, Alio Dante." Rivers said, his voice steady and kind. "I want you to take it to the bike shop tomorrow. Tell them I sent you." Alio's eyes widened in confusion. "What's this?" "It's a voucher for a new bike," Dante Rivers explained. "Something better than the one you've got. I know you've got big dreams, and I want to make sure you've got the tools to make them come true." Marisol's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A new bike for Alio. She had never even imagined something like this. But she couldn't find the words. Dante Rivers smiled, cutting her off gently. "No need to thank me. Just promise me you'll let Lucas Morales keep dreaming. That's the real gift." Alio, in his usual childlike enthusiasm, immediately jumped out of the car and raced up the stairs to the apartment, the paper clutched tightly in his hand. Elena Morales lingered a moment longer, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice catching in her throat. "You don't know how much this means to us." Dante Rivers nodded. "Just pay it forward when you can. That's all I ask." As Elena Morales stepped inside the apartment, she felt like the weight she had carried for so long had been lifted, even if only for a moment. There was still so much to do, so much to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that things might be okay. That maybe, just maybe, Emilio's dreams weren't as impossible as they had seemed. The following days after the encounter with Big Shaq felt surreal, like something out of a dream. Elena Morales kept replaying that moment in the car, Dante Rivers' words echoing in her mind. "I want to make sure you've got the tools to make your dreams come true." She hadn't yet brought herself to tell Emilia what Dante Rivers had done. He would be ecstatic when he found out, but she wanted to be sure it was real. The weather hadn't improved much. The rain, persistent and unyielding, seemed to symbolize the storm inside her own heart, an unrelenting worry that kept her up at night. But there was also a glimmer of hope now, a hope that had been missing for so long as she couldn't deny it. There was something almost magical about how one simple act of kindness could change everything. The voucher that Dante Rivers had given them for a new bike burned a hole in her pocket, but Marisol held on to it, trying to keep the reality of it at bay, afraid it might all vanish. She had made a mental note to head to the bike shop the next day, but she wasn't quite ready to let herself believe that their luck had changed. It was the evening when everything fell apart again. Elena Morales had just finished her shift at the diner, wiping down the last of the tables. The rain had started again, this time heavier than ever. It wasn't unusual for Charleston to see this kind of weather in the spring, but tonight felt different. It felt ominous. The wind howled through the streets, and the sound of the downpour was deafening. All Elena Morales wanted to do is get home, curl up in bed, and forget the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. She had just finished gathering her things when she received a text from Alio. "Mom, the bike broke. Can you come get me?" Her heart dropped into her stomach. The bike. He had been so excited about it. The idea that his dreams of cycling were finally within reach. And now, just days after he had received the voucher from Dante Rivers, it was broken again. Elena Morales quickly texted back, "Where are you?" Her fingers trembled as she typed. "I'm coming." Emilio's response was almost immediate. "I'm by the old store on Oak Street." The old store was just a few blocks away from their apartment, but it wasn't a place she wanted to go, especially in this kind of weather. It was a rough part of town, one of those places where people went when they had nowhere else to turn. She knew Lucas Morales liked to hang out there with his friends, and while she didn't like it, she understood that it was where kids went when they wanted to escape from everything else. Marcel sighed, slipping on her raincoat and grabbing her umbrella. She would never get used to the feeling of walking through the city alone, knowing that no matter how hard she tried, she could never protect Emilio from the things that lurked in the shadows of their lives. As she walked down the narrow street, the rain was coming down harder, making the pavement shine like a mirror. The wind pushed against her, but she kept her head down, determined to reach Lucas Morales as quickly as she could. Her mind raced with worry, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had this gnawing sensation that things weren't going to be okay. When she reached Oak Street, she saw him, and Emilio was standing by the old storefront, his face covered in raindrops, his expression one of confusion and sadness. He was holding the broken bike, the frame bent and twisted in a way that no amount of duct tape could fix. "Mama," he said, his voice cracking as he handed her the bike. It's broken. I don't know what happened." Elena Morales took the bike from him, her heart breaking for him. She wanted to say something, anything to make him feel better. but her words caught in her throat. All she could do was hold him close as he trembled in the rain, his disappointment and frustration palpable. "It's okay, mijo," she whispered, trying to steady her voice. "We'll fix it, okay? We'll make sure it gets fixed." But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The bike was ruined, and their already strained finances couldn't afford to fix it. She had promised Lucas Morales that everything would be fine. But how could she keep that promise when the reality of their situation kept crashing down on them? Just then, Marisol heard a noise. Footsteps behind her, heavy and deliberate. She turned quickly, her heart racing, but the figure was already too close. It was a man, tall and stocky, wearing a hooded Mr. Carter Brookset that shielded his face from the rain. His presence was unsettling, the way he moved toward them with an almost predatory precision. "You two look lost," the man said, his voice low and dangerous. "What's a little thing like you doing out here in the rain?" Yeah, Marisol's instincts kicked in. She pulled Lucas Morales closer, her hand reaching for her phone in her pocket. She wasn't sure what this man wanted, but she wasn't going to take any chances. "We're fine," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just, trying to get home." The man took another step forward, his eyes narrowing. "I don't think so. You look like you could use some help." Before Marisol could react, the man lunged, grabbing the broken bike from her hands. Lucas Morales gasped, trying to pull it back, but the man was stronger. He yanked it out of Elio's grasp, then looked at it with a sneer. "This thing's a joke. You think you can race with this?" He threw the bike onto the sidewalk with a thud. "Worthless just like you." Elena Morales felt a rush of heat, anger, and fear combining into a knot in her chest. She took a step forward, her voice trembling with defiance. "Give it back. It's not yours." The man just chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "What's a little thing like you going to do about it?" He took a step closer now, standing directly in front of her. Before Elena Morales could react, a car screeched to a halt behind them. The headlights cut through the rain like a spotlight. The man froze, turning toward the car, his posture suddenly shifting. Big Shaq's deep voice echoed through the rain. "You've got 5 seconds to walk away." The man hesitated, then let out a frustrated grunt. With a final glare, he turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the maze of alleyways that stretched behind the old store. Marisol's heart was pounding in her chest. She turned to Dante Rivers, who had stepped out of the SUV, looking every bit the imposing figure he was. Shaq's calm demeanor hadn't changed, but there was an intensity in his eyes as he took in the broken bike and the state of things. "You all right?" Dante Rivers asked, his voice steady. Marisol nodded, still shaken. "We're fine to just thank you. Thank you for being here." Dante Rivers gave a nod, his eyes softening. "Sometimes you don't realize how far someone can fall until they're already down, but it's never too late to get back up." Dante Rivers then helped them lift the broken bike into his car. "I'll take care of this. You two head home. I've got you covered." Elena Morales didn't know how to respond, but as she got into the car with Alio ease, she felt something inside her shift. Maybe things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. Then maybe with a little help, they could still make it through. The following days blurred into a haze of uncertainty and cautious hope. Elena Morales found herself in a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that the storm seemed to have passed, mixed with the nagging sense that something was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. The night Emilio's bike had been stolen, note taken by that man, felt like a turning point, a defining moment where the life they had been living seemed impossible to continue, but where the seed of something better had also been planted. Shaq had come to their rescue in ways that Marisol couldn't have expected, and with his unexpected help, they were starting to piece together a future that hadn't seemed possible just days ago. She couldn't stop thinking about how calm he had been stepping into that situation without hesitation. He had been there standing between them, in the danger, offering the kind of protection she never expected to find in the middle of this crumbling city. But there was more to it, something bigger than just a simple act of kindness. Marcel had spent that night in a daze. Dante Rivers had taken the broken bike from them, promising to have it fixed. His words about getting them back on track echoed in her mind, and she couldn't quite process the enormity of what was happening. She wasn't used to this kind of generosity, especially not from a man who had no reason to give them anything. What did he want from them? Why had he stepped in when so many others had looked away? The next day, Marisol found herself pacing in their tiny apartment. She was waiting for Lucas Morales to return from school, where he was no doubt bubbling over with excitement about the possibility of having a new bike. But what really weighed on her mind was what had happened the night before the encounter with the man on Oak Street, and how quickly things could have gone wrong. If Dante Rivers hadn't been there, if he hadn't been watching, what would have happened? The thought made her stomach churn. When Lucas Morales finally walked through the door that afternoon, his eyes lit up the moment he saw her. He was grinning from ear to ear, his excitement palpable as he ran toward her. "Mom! Mom!" he shouted, practically jumping up and down. "You won't believe what I saw today." The bike shop. Dante Rivers, he's fixing my bike. And not just fixing it, Mom. He's getting me a brand new one. A real one. And the best one they have. Melia was practically vibrating with joy, his words tumbling out in an excited rush. Elena Morales felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't known exactly how much Dante Rivers had done until now, as she had suspected he was going to take care of the bike. But hearing Elio's excitement made her realize just how much this man had invested in their future. "Really?" Elena Morales asked, trying to mask the emotion in her voice. "A brand new one. Yes, and it's going to be so fast, Mom. I'm going to win that race. I just know it. I'm going to be the fastest, rider there." The pride in his voice made Marisol's heart swell with happiness. He didn't understand the gravity of the situation. Not yet, at least. He didn't know that the bike wasn't just a symbol of his success. It was also a symbol of the changes that were beginning to take place in their lives. The bike was a gift, yes, but it was also a lifeline, a chance to show Lucas Morales the dreams weren't just for the rich kids with shiny new gear. They were for anyone who had the courage to go after them. Elena Morales held him tightly, her arms wrapping around him in an embrace that spoke volumes of gratitude, of love, and of hope. But it was also a hug full of silent questions. She still didn't understand why Dante Rivers had stepped in. She didn't know where this was all headed, or whether they could even keep up with the sudden flood of kindness and generosity that had entered their lives. Later that evening, Dante Rivers called. Elena Morales answered, her voice still filled with uncertainty. "Hey, it's Dante Rivers. I just wanted to check in. How's Lucas Morales doing?" He's great," she said, forcing the words out. He's over the moon. Honestly, he can't stop talking about the new bike." "That's good to hear." Dante Rivers replied, his tone as calm as ever. "Listen, I've got a little something else I want to discuss with you." Elena Morales furrowed her brow. "What is it?" Dante Rivers took a moment before speaking again, his voice thoughtful. "I know things haven't been easy for you, Marisol, and I see how hard you've been working for Alio, but I also see the stress you're under. I've been there too, trying to do it all on my own. But sometimes we need a little help, and I think now's the time for you to get that help." Marisol's chest tightened at his words. She wasn't sure what he was getting at. She had lived her whole life without asking for anything from anyone. What did she, need help with now? "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. I've been working with, out of the local youth sports center here in town," Dante Rivers explained. "They need an administrative assistant, someone to handle the office, help with organizing the kids' programs. The hours are flexible, the pay is better than what you're getting now, and you'd have health benefits too. I think it's a great fit for you, and I can help get you in there." Elena Morales felt a wave of disbelief hit her. A real job, a better job, a chance to stop juggling two low-paying, exhausting shifts, constantly worrying about bills and food, and start working towards something more stable, more sustainable? Shock. I don't know what to say, she said, her voice shaky. This is too much. I can't accept all of this. You're not accepting charity, Dante Rivers replied firmly. You're accepting an opportunity. You've done so much for Emilio. Now it's time to do something for yourself. You deserve it. She didn't know how to respond to that. She had never been one to think of herself first. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that maybe this was exactly what she needed, an opportunity, a chance to stop struggling so hard and start building something stable for herself and Alio. I'll think about it, Marisol finally said, her voice thick with emotion. Dante Rivers' voice softened. Take your time, but just know that I've got your back. Maricel and I believe in you. After she hung up, Marisol sat in the silence of their small apartment, her mind racing with thoughts and possibilities. She couldn't believe how much had changed in such a short time. There was a future ahead of them now, one that she hadn't even dared to imagine before. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. Dream of a life where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. A life where Lucas Morales could follow his passion, and she could finally give him everything he deserved. Maybe things were starting to fall into place. The apartment was quieter than usual. When Elena Morales returned home that evening, the sound of the rain tapping rhythmically against the windows, providing a strange sense of calm. Lucas Morales was already in bed, likely still dreaming of his new bike in the race that was just around the corner. The prospect of a new beginning hung in the air, but despite the relief, there was a part of Elena Morales that couldn't shake the heavy weight of the unknown. Her mind kept circling back to the conversation with Dante Rivers. She had agreed to think about the job, but in truth it felt like too much too fast. Elena Morales had spent years building her life around what she could control. 2 jobs, late nights, early mornings, all for Elio. She had never let herself hope for something better until now. But to change everything, to move away from the life she knew was daunting. Would she be able to balance the responsibility of a better job while still making sure Emilio's dreams came true? Could she let herself believe in the possibility of real change? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She froze. It was late. Who could it be? She stood still for a moment, unsure, but then she heard it again, a soft knock followed by the sound of someone waiting outside. She walked slowly to the door, glancing once more at Emilio's room, where the faint sounds of his breathing told her he was deep asleep. Opening the door cautiously, Elena Morales was met by a familiar face, Dante Rivers. For a moment, she stood there surprised. She hadn't expected him to come by again so soon. Dante Rivers, what she started, but he held up his hand with a gentle smile. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, his voice warm. I just thought I'd bring you something. Elena Morales stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The apartment, as always, was modest, but the light in the small living room was cozy, a place that felt warm despite the worn furniture. Dante Rivers looked around with a kind smile, his gaze softening as he took in the scene. You've got a good setup here, Marisol, he said, nodding toward Emilio's corner, where a small desk was now set up, the books and papers neatly arranged, a symbol of the care she put into his future. Elena Morales nodded but didn't say anything. She wasn't used to receiving compliments about her life, especially not from someone like Dante Rivers. It felt strange, almost like she didn't deserve it. But she welcomed his presence for some reason. There was something comforting about him. Yeah. Alike, he understood struggles that she couldn't explain. I thought I'd bring you some coffee. Dante Rivers continued pulling out a thermos from his bag. It's from a local shop down the street. I figured you could use a little pick-me-up. Elena Morales smiled, though there was a bittersweet edge to it. She'd been running on empty for so long, trying to manage everything that life had thrown her way. She hadn't stopped long enough to think about the little things, the moments that could offer real rest. Shock's gesture, simple as it was felt like a small oasis in the middle of her constant fight to stay afloat. "You didn't have to," Elena Morales said, though her voice softened as she motioned for him to sit at the kitchen table. "But, and I appreciate it." Shaq settled into a chair, his presence as easy as ever, as though the world outside this apartment didn't exist. "I figured we could sit and talk for a bit. I know it's been a lot and I wanted to check in. Plus, we could use a little break from all the noise." Elena Morales nodded. She hadn't realized how much she needed to pause, how much she longed to just talk to someone who wasn't tied to the daily grind of survival. They were both silent for a moment, the sound of the rain gently tapping against the windows filling the space between them. Finally, Elena Morales spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about the job you mentioned. The sports center one." Dante Rivers nodded, his eyes steady. "Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it," she admitted, her voice hesitant. "I've spent so long making sure Lucas Morales has everything he needs. What if I can't do both? What if it's too much? You don't have to do everything alone," Elena Morales said, gently setting the thermos down. "I see you working hard every day trying to hold it all together for Elio, but sometimes you need to take a step back. You need something that's for you, too." Elena Morales took a slow breath, her hands wrapped around the cup of coffee he had poured for her. The warm liquid settled in her chest, grounding her in the moment. But the weight of Shaq's words lingered. She had been so focused on what she had to do for Lucas Morales that she had forgotten what it meant to take care of herself, to let herself believe that her own dreams mattered too. "I don't know how to let go of the control," she said, her voice soft, almost as if she were confessing a secret. "I've been doing it alone for so long, and it's hard to imagine what it would be like to just let someone help me." Dante Rivers leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "It's okay to ask for help, Marisol. It's okay to trust that things don't have to be so hard all the time." She looked down at her hands, trying to push back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She had always been the strong one, the one who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without complaint. But she knew that if she wanted to give Lucas Morales the future he deserved, she couldn't keep doing it all on her own. "I want to believe in it," Marisol said quietly. "I want to believe that things can be better, that I can do more for Alio. But I don't know if I can do it all." Dante Rivers' voice was firm, but kind. "You don't have to do it all. You just need to take the next step. And you've already done that by giving yourself a chance to dream again." Elena Morales closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. The room was quiet save for the sound of the rain. But in that silence, something shifted. The weight that had been pressing down on her chest, this fear of failing, of not being enough, began to lift just a little. She looked back up at him, her gaze steady now. I think I'm ready for the job, for the change." Dante Rivers smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "That's all you need, Marisol. One step at a time." They sat together in the silence for a while longer, the rain outside still pouring relentlessly, but inside it felt like a moment of peace had finally found its way into her heart. For the first time in a long time, Elena Morales allowed herself to feel like she wasn't just surviving, she was living. And maybe, and just maybe, she was starting to believe that things could be different. The morning after Shaq's visit, the apartment was still and quiet. The kind of morning that felt more like a promise than just another day. The rain had finally stopped, though the streets outside still glistened with the remnants of the storm. Elena Morales had spent most of the night thinking. Turning over everything Shaq had said, she was still nervous about the changes ahead, about stepping into the unknown. But there was a new sense of hope in her heart, a hope that had been hard to come by for so many years. The sound of Amelia's voice brought her back to the present. "Mom, you've got to see this." His voice rang through the apartment, filled with the kind of excitement that was impossible to ignore. Elena Morales couldn't help but smile as she walked into the living room, wondering what had him so thrilled. Emilio was standing at the window, his face pressed against the glass. When he saw her, his eyes widened with excitement. "Mama, look, there's a bike. It's sitting right there on the sidewalk." He was pointing outside, his fingers shaking with enthusiasm. Elena Morales blinked in surprise. She stepped forward, peering out of the window, and what she saw took her breath away. There, sitting neatly on the sidewalk in front of their apartment building, was a brand-new top-of-the-line racing bike. The kind of bike she had only ever seen in magazines or on the backs of other kids who had wealth and opportunity she could only dream of. But this bike was meant for Emilio. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure if her eyes were deceiving her. But no, it was real. The bike was real. The shiny red frame gleamed in the morning light. The wheels slick and smooth, and even the handlebars had a perfect bow wrapped around them. It was like something out of a dream, a miracle come to life right before her eyes. "Mom, is that for me?" Emilio asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for her. Elena Morales couldn't find her voice immediately. She felt a lump in her throat, her heart racing as the reality of what was happening settled in. She had promised Emilio she would fix his bike. She had promised him she would make sure he had the chance to race. But this was more than she could have ever imagined. A brand new bike, just like the one he had dreamed about. She nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on the bike outside. "I think it is," she said, her voice barely audible. "I think it's a gift." Without waiting another second, Amelia rushed to the door, nearly tripping over his feet in his eagerness to get to the bike. Mercule followed, her heart pounding as she watched him push open the door and race outside. "Wait!" she called after him, but he was already halfway down the stairs, his small legs carrying him faster than she could follow. Mercule hurried after him, her pulse quickening with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. By the time she reached the sidewalk, Lucas Morales was already standing next to the bike, his hands gently caressing the frame as if he couldn't believe it was real. He looked up at her, eyes wide with awe. "It's really for me, Mom. It's really mine." Elena Morales felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she didn't wipe it away. She could barely contain the emotions that surged through her as she knelt beside him. "Yes, mijo. It's really for you." Just then, she saw a familiar figure walking down the street toward them. Big Shaq. His calm, steady presence was unmistakable. And Elena Morales felt a surge of gratitude rush through her as he approached them. "I hope it's to your liking," Shaq said with a smile, his voice as warm and assuring as ever. Emilio's face lit up even more when he saw him. "It's amazing. It's exactly what I dreamed of." Dante Rivers chuckled softly, glancing at Marisol. "I figured it would be. I know how much this race means to you both." Marcel stood slowly still in disbelief, looking from Dante Rivers to the bike and back again. "You didn't have to do this, Dante Rivers." "We never expected." Dante Rivers raised a hand to stop her. "No need for thanks. This isn't about charity. It's about opportunity. You and Lucas Morales have worked so hard, and it's time to give back. No one should have to struggle this much for their dreams. It's time to make them a reality." "Yeah." Elena Morales stood there for a moment, her thoughts swirling. She had spent so many years holding on to the belief that things would never change. But here, right in front of her, was proof that things could change. Dante Rivers wasn't just giving them a bike, he was giving them the chance to believe again. He was helping them find their path, a path that seemed so impossible just weeks ago. "Thank you," Elena Morales said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to us." Dante Rivers nodded, his gaze steady. "I know more than you think, Marisol. I've been where you are. It's not easy, but you keep going, keep believing, and eventually things will turn around." Alio, who had been practically bouncing with joy since the moment he saw the bike, suddenly became serious. He looked up at Dante Rivers and then back at his mom. "I'm going to win this race, Mom, I promise, and when I do, I'm going to give the trophy to you. You're the real champion." Marisol's heart swelled with pride. She had always wanted Lucas Morales to know how much she believed in him, how much she would sacrifice for his dreams. But hearing him say those words, it felt like the culmination of all her struggles, all her sacrifices finally paying off. I'm so proud of you, mijo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're already a champion in my eyes." Dante Rivers smiled at the exchange, his eyes softening. "See, that's the real victory right there. The love and support you give each other, that's the foundation for everything else." As the morning sun began to rise higher, casting a golden glow over the street, Elena Morales stood beside Lucas Morales and watching as he carefully inspected his new bike, running his fingers over every detail. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. The struggles hadn't gone away, not by any means, but now there was hope. Hope that they could overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. Dante Rivers gave them both a final nod before turning to leave. "Take care, Marisol. Take care, Alio. You've got this." And as he walked away, Elena Morales couldn't help but feel that the road ahead was no longer as uncertain as it had once seemed. They weren't alone anymore. And no, they had each other in the chance to dream, to build, and to succeed. The days following the arrival of the new bike were filled with a sense of quiet disbelief. Lucas Morales couldn't stop talking about his new racing bike. Every morning before school, he would go outside, run his hands over its shiny red frame, and marvel at its perfection. He'd hop on riding it around the block just to feel the wind in his hair and the smoothness of the wheels beneath him. It was as if the bike had given him wings, a sense of freedom he had never known before. But the truth was, it wasn't just the bike that had changed. It was everything. Elena Morales watched him with a mix of pride and concern. She knew that Lucas Morales had dreamed of this for so long, and she had promised him she would do whatever it took to help him get there. And now, thanks to Dante Rivers, Emilio had a chance to realize his dream. But the weight of that promise still hung over her. Could she keep up with this new life? This new chapter they had entered, Shaq's offer of the job at the Youth Sports Center, had been weighing heavily on her. It was an opportunity unlike anything she had ever dreamed of. A real job with benefits hours that allowed her to spend more time with Alio and, most importantly, stability. But the idea of stepping into something so unfamiliar, something so far from the struggle she had known for years, was terrifying. She hadn't yet made a decision, but she couldn't deny the pull of the opportunity. The truth was she had been living in survival mode for so long that the idea of thriving felt like something she didn't deserve. One evening after Lucas Morales had gone to bed, Elena Morales sat at the small kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling in front of her. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. She stared out the window at the dark street below. Lost in thought, she thought about everything. Dante Rivers had said everything he had done for them. He had given them a bike, yes, but more than that, he had given them the chance to dream again. And in doing so, a kid reminded her that there was more to life than just getting by. She didn't have to keep struggling alone. There were people out there who cared, who wanted to help, and she had the right to accept that help. The next morning, she woke up early, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Amelia was still asleep when she left the apartment. She had decided it was time to take the next step. Time to meet with the Youth Sports Center and see if this job could really be the change they needed. The center was a short drive from their apartment, nestled in a small park near the edge of town. As she pulled into the parking lot, she felt her heart race. This was it. This could be the fresh start she had been waiting for, but it was also the unknown. the leap into a new life that she wasn't sure she was ready for. Inside the center, she was greeted by a friendly woman at the front desk who led her to an office at the back of the building. The director, a middle-aged man named Mr. Carter Brooks, stood when she entered. His warm handshake and welcoming smile immediately put her at ease. "Marisol, it's great to meet you," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I've heard wonderful things about you from Dante Rivers. He said you've got the skills we need to help run the office, keep things organized, and help us grow this place." She smiled nervously, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm just here to learn more about the position," she said. I'm not sure if I'm the right fit, but I'm willing to try." Mr. Carter Brooks nodded his eyes, thoughtful. "I think you'll be a great fit. What I'm looking for isn't just someone who can do the job. I want someone who cares about the kids, who understands the value of what we're doing here. It's more than just sports. It's about giving these kids an opportunity to succeed. Just like your son." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had always believed that education and opportunity were the keys to a better life. And hearing someone else say it so plainly made her realize just how much this job could mean for her, for Alio, and for their future. "We want someone who's got heart," Mr. Carter Brooks continued. And from what I've heard, you've got plenty of that." Marisol's eyes welled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. She wasn't sure why she was so emotional. Maybe it was because for the first time in so long, someone was offering her the chance to build something for herself, to make a difference, not just for Alio, but for other kids like him. "I'm in," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm ready to do this. I want to be a part of what you're building here." Mr. Carter Brooks smiled, standing up to shake her hand again. "I'm glad to hear it. Welcome to the Team Mercule." As she left the building, her mind was racing with excitement. This was it. This was the change she had been hoping for, a real job, a chance to help kids the way she had always wanted to help Alio. It was everything she had dreamed of, and it was happening. But there was still one thing she needed to do. Tell Alio. That evening after dinner, she sat him down at the kitchen table. He looked up at her, his face still glowing from the excitement of his new bike. "Mama, what's going on?" he asked, sensing the shift in the air. Elena Morales smiled at him, feeling the weight of the moment. "I have some news, Micho. I've accepted a new job. I'll be working at the Youth Sports Center, helping kids like you chase their dreams." Emilio's eyes went wide, and for a moment he didn't say anything. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "That's awesome, Mom. I'm so proud of you." Mercil felt a tear slip down her cheek as she hugged him tightly. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. This job, this new beginning, it wasn't just a fresh start for her. It was a fresh start for them both. In the weeks that followed, everything began to change. Elena Morales settled into her new role at the Youth Sports Center. The work was challenging, but it was fulfilling in ways she had never imagined. Every morning, she got up early, dressed in clothes that made her feel confident, and headed to a place where she was respected for more than just her ability to juggle in multiple jobs. She was appreciated for her heart, for the way she cared about the kids, for the way she believed in what the center was trying to do. Give every child, no matter their background, the opportunity to succeed. And then there was Alio. Seeing him ride his new bike every morning with his friends racing alongside him brought tears to her eyes. He was more than just her son. He was proof that dreams could come true even in the most unlikely of circumstances. The race he had been preparing for was just a few weeks away, and the excitement surrounding it had grown exponentially. He was no longer the underdog trying to catch up. He was a contender, someone who had a real shot at winning. But more than that, he was a young boy with a heart full of hope and ambition. One afternoon, after a long day at the sports center, Elena Morales sat down on the worn couch in their apartment, feeling the weight of the day lift off her shoulders. She looked over at Lucas Morales, who was reading a book about cycling techniques, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. He had come so far since the days of struggling with his broken bike, and Elena Morales couldn't help but feel proud. "Mom, do you think I'll win the race?" Emilio asked, not looking up from the book. Medisol smiled, her heart swelling with love for her son. "I think you've already won. Mijo, you've worked so hard and you've never given up on your dreams. That's what matters most." Emilio's face lit up and he nodded. "I'm going to win it for you, Mom. You've been working so hard, too. You deserve it." Those words, simple as they were, hit her like a wave. Lucas Morales had always been her source of strength. But in that moment, she realized how much she had become his strength, too. It was a beautiful, bittersweet moment, seeing her son, the little boy who had relied on her for everything, not believing in her, the way she had always believed in him. But as proud as Elena Morales was, she knew that their journey was far from over. They had made it through the hardest part, but the real challenge was still ahead. And how could they continue to build on the foundation that had been given to them? How could they take the lessons they had learned, the kindness they had been shown, and use it to help others who were still struggling just as they had? The answer came to her slowly over the course of several weeks as she continued to see the ripple effects of Dante Rivers' generosity. Dante Rivers had given them a chance. Yes, as more than that, he had shown them how to give back, how to use their own story, their own struggles to help others. One day, after a particularly rewarding meeting at the Youth Sports Center, Elena Morales found herself talking to Dante Rivers on the phone. She had been mulling over an idea for some time, something that could give back to the community in a way that would truly make a difference. "Shaq, I've been thinking," she said, her voice full of determination. "What if we started something? What if we created a program to give bikes to kids who don't have the resources for them? I know there are other kids out there, just like Emilio, who would be able to do so much more if they had the opportunity." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Dante Rivers responded, "I love it. That's exactly what I've been waiting to hear. We can make it happen. We can call it the Dream Wheels Project." And just like that, the idea was born. Over the next few months, Elena Morales and Nashek worked tirelessly to put the Dream Wheels project into motion. They reached out to local businesses for donations, spoke with schools and community organizations to identify children who would benefit from the program, and set up fundraising events to cover the cost of new bikes. It is a huge undertaking, but Elena Morales was more determined than ever. She had seen the power of a single act of kindness, the way it had changed her and Emilio's life, and now she wanted to share that gift with others. The Dream Wheels project quickly became a success. Through their efforts, they were able to provide bikes to dozens of kids who had never had the chance to experience the freedom and excitement that came with owning a real bicycle. The first giveaway event was held at the sports center, and the joy on the kids' faces as they received their new bikes was priceless. Elena Morales watched as each child rode off with a grin on their face. The same grin she had seen on Alio's face when he first got his new bike. It was a moment of triumph not just for the kids but for Maris Hoki, who had worked so hard to make it all possible. But the real impact of the Dream Wheels project went beyond just providing its bikes. It created a sense of community, a bond between the kids and the people who had helped make it all happen. It gave the kids a sense of pride and belonging, and it showed them that someone believed in them, that someone cared enough to invest in their future. Alio, who had been one of the first to receive a bike from the program, was now an active participant, helping other kids learn how to ride and encouraging them to believe in themselves. He spoke at local schools, sharing his story with other kids who might be facing the same struggles he once had. His words resonated deeply with them. His story of starting with nothing, of believing in something bigger, of being willing to work hard for what he wanted. Elena Morales watched with tears in her eyes as Emilio stood before a group of kids at a local school assembly sharing his journey and encouraging them to never give up. "You don't have to start with everything," he said. "You just have to start, and if you work hard enough, you'll get where you want to go." Her heart swelled with pride as she listened to her son speak. The boy who had once struggled with a broken bike, the boy who had been overlooked by others, was now a beacon of hope for so many. It was in this moment that Maricasel realized the true power of paying it forward, the way one act of kindness could spark a ripple that spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. And as she stood there, watching Alio, she knew that they had not only changed their own lives, they had changed the lives of countless others. The morning sun filtered softly through the apartment's thin curtains, casting a warm glow over the small space. Elena Morales sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands, gazing out of the window at the quiet street below. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm, of peace, that hadn't been there before. It had been a journey, a long and sometimes painful road, but it had brought her to this moment, the moment where she could finally breathe and believe that the future might be different. Emilio was in the other room, his bike leaning against the wall, already preparing for another day of training. The race he had been working so hard for was just around the corner. And every day he grew more determined, more confident in his abilities. It wasn't just about the bike or the race anymore. It was about the path he was carving for himself, the belief that anything was possible if you just kept going. Marisol's phone buzzed in the table, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Dante Rivers, one she had come to look forward to over the past few months. "Hey, just wanted to check in. How's everything going with the Dream Wheels project?" She smiled to herself, typing a quick reply. "It's going better than I ever imagined. We've given bikes to so many kids, and I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. It's been life-changing for all of us." As she hit send, she leaned back in her chair, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had unfolded. It had all started with one simple act of kindness: a stranger stopping to offer an umbrella on a rainy night. And that single moment had set in motion everything that had come after. The Dream Wheels project had grown far beyond her expectations. What had started as an idea to give bikes to a few kids in need had turned into a movement, with families, local businesses, and even schools coming together to support the cause. The ripple effect of kindness that Dante Rivers had sparked had grown exponentially, and now there was a community of people working together to make sure no child went without the opportunity to dream. Lucas Morales had become more than just a participant in the project. He had become a symbol of what was possible when someone believed in you. He was the face of the Dream Wheels project, speaking at events, sharing his story, and inspiring other kids to chase their dreams. His voice was filled with passion and conviction as he told his story of how one act of kindness had changed his life forever. He had gone from being the quiet kid who was overlooked to being the voice of hope for so many. Marisol's heart swelled with pride as she thought of how far Emilio had come. The boy who once struggled with a broken bike was now leading a movement that was changing lives. But more than that, he had learned the most important lesson of all, and the power of giving back. The power of paying it forward. The past few months had taught Elena Morales something she had never fully understood before. It wasn't just about surviving. It wasn't just about scraping by trying to make ends meet. Life was about more than just the struggle. It was about connection, about reaching out to others when they needed it most. It was about showing up when it mattered, offering a hand when someone was falling and lifting them up so they could stand on their own. She thought back to those early days when she was working herself into the ground, trying to make ends meet, trying to hold everything together. She had been so focused on surviving that she had forgotten how to live. But now, with the help of Dante Rivers, with the support of the community, and with Emilio by her side, she understood that there was more to life than just getting by. There was the opportunity to give, to love, to make a difference in the lives of others. And that was the lesson she wanted to pass on to Elio. The lesson that life wasn't just about taking, about always looking for what you could get. It was about giving. It was about sharing your blessings, no matter how small, and spreading kindness wherever you could. As the days drew closer to Emilio's race, the excitement was palpable. Did you eat, or all the whole community had rallied behind him, and the support was overwhelming, but it wasn't about the race anymore. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about the journey, the lessons learned along the way, and the way they had all come together to help one another. On the day of the race, the atmosphere was electric. The stands were packed with families, friends, and supporters, all eager to see the kids race. Merciel stood at the edge of the track, watching as Lucas Morales lined up with the other cyclists, his red bike gleaming in the sunlight. He was focused, determined, but there was something else in his eyes. A sense of pride and confidence that hadn't been there before. This wasn't just a race. This was the culmination of everything they had worked for. When the whistle blew and the race began, Elena Morales felt her heart race with him. She watched as Lucas Morales flew around the track, the wind whipping past him as he pushed himself harder than ever before. He wasn't in the lead, but it didn't matter. He was riding for something greater than just a medal. He was riding for every child who had ever felt overlooked, for every person who had ever struggled to make their dreams come true. As the race drew to a close, Lucas Morales crossed the finish line in second place. He didn't win, but in that moment, he had already won everything that mattered. He had given it his all, and that was more than enough. When he came to a stop, breathless and smiling, Marvel ran over to him, her arms open wide. "You did it, mijo." She exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud of you." Emilio grinned, holding up the trophy he had earned. "This is for you, Mom," he said, his voice full of pride. "You're the real champion." Tears filled Marisol's eyes as she hugged him tightly, realizing that the greatest victory was not the race itself, but the love, the sacrifices, and the lessons they had learned along the way. As they stood there together, the sun setting in the distance, she knew that their journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. There was still so much to do, so much to give. But now, they had each other, and with that, anything was possible. Dante Rivers's words echoed in her mind. Kindness doesn't need permission. It needs action. Sometimes the most beautiful dresses aren't sewn with silk and lace, but with compassion, sacrifice, and love. What Dante Rivers gave that father wasn't just a gown, it was dignity. It was hope. And it was a message to all of us that kindness doesn't always need to be loud. It just needs to show up. But what do you think? Was this a touching act of selflessness, or a moment staged for the spotlight? Let us know in the comments below. If stories like this stir something in your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little light today, and subscribe to Soulful Stories I4, where everyday people and extraordinary moments come together to remind us what it means to be human.